Hello and welcome to the Weekly Review, a program brought to you by South Network. I'm Samuel Garang, your host, and together with our chief correspondent and editor, Roger Alfred Yoron Modi, we will be presenting this show every week. And when needs be, some of these episodes of this program will also feature social, religious, and political leaders, as well as members of the general public. At the Weekly Review, we make sense of the news about South Sudan. We also discuss other issues of concern to South Sudanese at home and in the diaspora. Every Monday, we shall upload a new episode on our YouTube channel, South Network, and share the same on our various social media platforms and our website, southnetwork.org. Due to the ongoing crisis in South Sudan and around the world, the Weekly Review episodes shall continue to focus on COVID-19 and the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan. Other relevant topics shall be looked into from time to time. Now, without further ado, we are hereby officially launching the Weekly Review episode number 1, covering last week, May 24th to the May 30th. Our chief correspondent, Roger, please welcome to the show.
Thank you, Garang.
Now, let me begin with the first question. Let's begin with the topic, the COVID-19. It was on the 5th of April, about 2 months ago, that South Sudan announced the first case of COVID-19 in the country. So tell us about the current situation of the pandemic in South Sudan.
Well, the latest update on COVID-19 in South Sudan was issued by the National Task Force Committee on Coronavirus Disease on Wednesday, the 27th. On that day, the National Task Force Committee reported 188 new COVID-19 cases in South Sudan, bringing the total of confirmed cases to 994. The task force also reported 6 recoveries and 10 fatalities.
Wow.
Meanwhile, on Saturday 30th, Vice President James Waniga publicly announced that he tested positive for the novel coronavirus. Iga is now the 3rd vice president to come out publicly about an own COVID-19 positive case after first Vice President Riek Machar and Vice President Hussein Abdulbagi Akol recently announced that they tested positive for the virus. Another top government official who publicly announced his COVID-19 positive result is Minister of Information, Communication, Technology and Postal Services, Michael Makwelweth. Some few members of the society also revealed their results publicly. However, many South Sudanese continue to keep their COVID-19 status confidential.
Okay, so that's really very sad to hear how this disease is really invading the country, and especially the top officials of the country. So our prayers is with them. And now you've talked about the National Task Force Committee on Coronavirus Disease. Is it any different? Is it different from the high-level Task Force Committee on COVID-19? And if so, what is the difference? Can you explain that to our audience?
Well, the high-level Task Force Committee on COVID-19 pandemic, which the first Vice President, Dr. Riek Machar, was its deputy chairman and the in charge of daily operations, where he regularly appeared in the media to give updates about the virus, was dissolved by President Salva Kiir a little over 2 weeks ago. That was on May 15th, to be exact. President Kiir then immediately, through another decree, formed a 17-member body called the National Task Force Committee on Coronavirus Disease and appointed Vice President Hussein Abdulbaghi Akol, its chairperson, deputized by the Minister of Health, Elizabeth Achua Yol. The May 18th presidential decree has given the National Task Force Committee on Coronavirus Disease much more roles compared to those previously held by the now defunct high-level Task Force Committee on COVID-19 pandemic. For example, item number 4 in the decree provides that, quote, the National Task Force Committee shall ensure that any person or persons suspected with COVID-19 must be immediately placed on institutional or self-quarantine and keenly monitored to avoid rampant spread of the disease. And for those confirmed with COVID-19 must be immediately put on treatment in isolation centers accordingly, unquote. Furthermore, the decree says the National Task Force may form subcommittees of not more than 10 members at the 10 states and the 3 administrative areas of the Republic of South Sudan in order to implement the directives of the National Task Force Committee at the level of the states, counties, Payams, and Boomers. Yeah.
Okay. So now, as the National Task Force on COVID-19 is going about its job, this newly created National Task Force, are there any challenges that they are facing? And if so, what are those?
Some of the challenges mentioned by the task force include resistance from family members in the burial of those who died of COVID-19. One of the measures put by the task force is that victims of COVID-19 will be buried by trained healthcare workers, not family members, to avoid infection among communities. However, the Undersecretary at the Ministry of Health, Dr. Makur Koryam, said they are getting resistance from members of the family of the victims, adding that what the task force does at the moment is just to try its best. Escapes from quarantine or isolation center are among other challenges facing the fight against COVID-19 in South Sudan. For example, on the 27th May, in a news report, iRadio cited the Secretary General of the defunct Awil State, Dominic Kangdeng, as telling them that one person who tested positive for COVID-19 in Maper escaped from the isolation center. And though Kang, according to the report, further said they were preparing to send the security organs and members of the task force to bring back the COVID-19 patient to the isolation center, at the time of recording this show, there was no indication that the patient was brought back. Another example is a week earlier when 24 people who arrived from Juba reportedly escaped from quarantine in Capoeira South County of Eastern Equatorial State.
Wow.
Due to limited food supply and improper fencing. The Secretary General of the now defunct Capoeira State, David Eriga, was quoted by Radio Tamazoj as saying the government managed to buy some foodstuff to sustain those put into quarantine, but some of them escaped due to laxity in security. And so resolving those two challenges still fall within the terms of reference of the task force as provided for in the presidential decree of May 18th, that the National Task Force shall ensure that any person or persons suspected with COVID-19 must be immediately placed on institutional or self-quarantine and keenly monitored to avoid rampant spread of the disease. and that those confirmed with COVID-19 must be immediately put on treatment in isolation centers accordingly. Item number 5 in that decree also provided that the National Task Force shall, in coordination and collaboration with all relevant health bodies, such as the World Health Organization, the African Union Center for Disease Control and Prevention, as well as non-governmental organizations operating in the country, including development partners, security organs, civil society organizations, women and youth groups, ensure that all the citizens are informed about the dangers of COVID-19 and educate them on the preventative and precautionary measures taken thereof. The same presidential decree also directed the Minister of Finance and Planning to avail, quote, the necessary funds, unquote, for the committee to implement its task. So perhaps in order to be more convincing to the public about the efforts in fighting the pandemic, the National Task Force needs to come out regularly on what's happening on the ground with respect to the implementation of the presidential decree.
Okay, so in light of all the challenges that you have just spoken about in terms of addressing the pandemic in South Sudan, now how do the figures look like for South Sudan's neighbors as the COVID-19 is concerned?
According to the figures on the website of the World Health Organization, as of the 30th of May, Sudan had 4,521 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 223 deaths. And the Democratic Republic of Congo, 2,832 confirmed cases, 68 deaths. Central Africa Republic, 874 confirmed cases, 1 death. And Kenya, 1,745 confirmed cases, 62 deaths. Ethiopia, 968 confirmed cases, 8 deaths. Uganda, 410 confirmed cases with 0 deaths. Those are the figures we have from the World Health Organization as of May 30th.
That's great. And so now, let's leave the topic of COVID-19 here for now until our next episode. And let's turn to the revitalized peace agreement. And so what update do you have for our audience about the status of the implementation of the peace agreement?
Well, about the revitalized agreement, on Monday, the 25th, Ateny Wek Ateny, the spokesperson of President Salva Kiir, confirmed that the president received the position of the SPLM-IO on the issue of the states. The SPLM-IO had earlier said they did submit their position on the matter. While we do not know the detail of the position submitted to the president, the SPLM-IO and the NDM had rejected the May 7th statement issued by the Office of the President in the name of the entire presidency on the issue of the states.
And so you said that so the SPLM-IO and NDM say they rejected the statement. No, what did that statement rejected by SPLM-IO and NDM say about the allocation of the states?
The statement claimed that President Kiir and his 5 vice presidents, including Dr. Machar, resolved to allocate 7 states to the former incumbent transitional government of national unity, namely Central Equatorial State, Eastern Equatorial State, Lakes State, Warab State, Northern Bahr el Ghazal State, and Unity State. Further, according to that statement, the SPLM-IO has been allocated 3 states: Jonglei State, Western Bahr el Ghazal, and Western Equatorial State, while 1 state, Upper Nile State, to be specific, has been allocated to SOA.
Okay, and so what did the SPLM-IO and the NDM cite or mention as their reason for rejecting such an allocation or arrangement? And what does the revitalized peace agreement say about the allocation of the state?
At the state and local government levels, Article 1, Sub-Article 16(1) of the revitalized agreement provides for the responsibility sharing formula as follows: 55% for the incumbent, 55% for the former incumbent transitional government of national unity. So that party to the agreement is the one of those of President Salva Kiir and those who were in government at that time. So they are referred to as incumbent transitional government of national unity. So now they are former incumbent. And 27% for the SPLM-IO, and 10% for SOA, and 8% for OPP, that is other political parties. The agreement says that at the beginning of the transitional period, state and local governments shall be reconstituted in accordance with the responsibility sharing formula, which I just mentioned. However, up to date, the reconstitution has not taken place, despite the fact that the transitional period began since February this year. The positions that shall be shared as per the responsibility sharing formula are governors, speakers of state legislatures, state councils of ministers, state legislatures, county commissioners, and county councils, the revitalized agreement says. Article 1, Sub-Article 16(4) further provides that in sharing state and local governments and local government positions, the parties shall take into account the relative prominence each party has in the respective state or county. Mm-hmm. The agreement says the FDs, that is the former detainees, mm-hmm, shall have 3 state ministers instead of their choice that shall be deducted from the opposition ratio. Those are the relevant provisions of the revitalized agreement on responsibility sharing in the states. Now let me answer your other question, which is what did the SPLM, IO, and NDM cite or mention as their reasons for rejecting the arrangements on the state allocation? State allocation mentioned in the statement from the Office of the President in the name of the entire presidency. Among other reasons, both the SPLM-IO and NDM argued that the presidency has no power to decide on allocation of states. Instead, Article 1, Sub-Article 16(4) of the revitalized agreement provides for the parties to decide on the issue. On the other hand, Article 7, Sub-Article 11 of the agreement says, following the establishment of the revitalized transitional government of national unity, the parties agree that in the event of any deadlock, the peace monitors, that is the reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission, known as RJMEC, shall propose measures to resolve the deadlocks, adding that in case any party or parties fails or fail to comply with the recommendations of RGMEC of breaking the deadlock, RGMEC will refer the matter to the guarantors of the revitalized agreement. And so, given the deadlock that emerged on the state's issue, both the SPLM-IO and NDM had been calling for adherence to that Article 7, Sub-Article 11 of the revitalized agreement to resolve the deadlock on the states.
Okay, thank you so much for your enlightening elaboration on that. Now let's turn to the recent development. On Friday, the 29th, the United Nations Security Council adopted a resolution extending until May next year an arms embargo on South Sudan and a travel ban, as well as financial sanctions for targeted individuals. Please, can you provide our audience a brief detail about that move?
Yes, it is true that the UN Security Council approved a resolution on Friday 29th, extending for a year an arms embargo on South Sudan, as well as a travel ban and financial sanctions for targeted individuals. The resolution was drafted by the United States, whereas Russia, China, and South Africa have argued that sanctions are not conducive to promoting the peace process in South Sudan, and they abstained from the vote. However, the resolution passed 12-0. Though the resolution extends the arms embargo and the targeted sanctions until May 31st, 2021, it also authorizes a midterm review of the measures by December 15th, 2020, this year, and expresses the Council's readiness to consider adjusting the sanctions, quote, including through modifying, suspending, lifting, or strengthening measures to respond to the situation, unquote. In a statement on Friday, Amnesty International's Director for East and Southern Africa, Debrose Muchena, welcomed the renewal of the arms embargo, saying, quote, it is crucial to curtailing the flow of weapons that have been used to commit war crimes, human rights violations, and abuses, unquote. Amnesty International called on the Security Council and UN member states to enforce the Council's resolution. That's something brief about what happened.
Okay, that's well. And now, what does the UN Security Council resolution say about South Sudan's revitalized peace agreement and the process in the country?
The resolution urges South Sudan's leaders to finalize establishment of the revitalized transitional government of national unity and fully implement all provisions of the revitalized peace agreement, including allowing unhindered humanitarian access to deliver aid. It welcomes, quote, encouraging developments in South Sudan's peace process, unquote, but also expresses, quote, deep concern at continued fighting, unquote, in the country and condemns violations of the peace deal and cessation of hostilities agreement. The UN Security Council resolution strongly condemns human rights violations, including, quote, harassment and targeting of civil society, humanitarian personnel and journalists, unquote, and also expresses, quote, deep concern at reports of misappropriation of funds that undermine the stability and security of South Sudan, unquote.
Okay. And now one last question. What does the UN Security Council resolution actually say about the UN panel of experts on South Sudan?
The resolution has also extended until the 1st of July 2021 the mandate of the UN panel of experts on South Sudan, the panel tasked with overseeing the sanctions imposed. Among others, the mandate of the panel of experts, as set out in paragraph 19 of the UN Security Council Resolution 2428 of the year 2018, which has just been extended, include the tasks to 1, gather, examine, and analyze information regarding the implementation of the measures decided in the UN Security Council resolution, in particular, incidents of non-compliance. So that is still about the mandate of the panel of experts. And 2, gather, examine, and analyze information regarding the supply, sale, or transfer of arms and related material and related military or other assistance, including the financing modalities of such activities, as well as procurement of these items through illicit trafficking networks to individuals and entities undermining implementation of the agreement or participating in acts that violate international human rights law or humanitarian law as applicable.
Okay. Thank you so much, our chief correspondent, Roger Alfred Yoron Modi. And to you, our audience, thanks for watching. As we pointed out earlier, this is the first episode of the Weekly Review, making sense of the news. For coming episodes, we shall be bringing relevant guests to participate in the show when possible. Also, we shall publish a new episode every Monday. So follow Sawa Network on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and our website, sawasawanetwork.org, to keep updated about our work. Once again, I'm Samuel Garang, your host. Bye for now.